Hey, what's up folks? It's Slider Dan here, and today we're going to talk about stance. Is there such thing as a correct one? Let's find out. Alright, so let's talk about stance. I feel like this is a topic that not a lot of people touch on, and so I just wanted to briefly go over it. If you're actually a beginner at one-wheeling, you haven't been on a board before, or you're just starting off, one important thing that I always tell beginners when I let people try my board is to figure out if they're a goofy or a regular rider. So that means whatever you're riding on your board, which foot is your dominant foot, that's gonna determine whether you're regular or a goofy. So, for example, I am a goofy rider, which means that my right foot goes on the front of the board, and then my rear foot will be my left foot. On the contrary, if you are a regular rider, that means that your left foot will go forward and your right foot will go on the back. An easy way to figure this out actually is if you jump, actually, you know what, go ahead and pause this video and why don't you go run up and jump right now and remember which foot you land on. What? Okay, so if you've done that and you remember which foot you landed on, so the foot that you landed on is your dominant foot. That's your front foot. That's the foot that you want to put in forwards. Okay? All right, so now that we got that figured out, before we move on more, I do want to mention, I really don't think that there is a correct way, a correct stance of riding a one-wheel. It's just each person has their personal preference and riding style. So it also depends on what kind of ride style you are into also as well. If you like to carve more and you like turning more, if that's your riding style, then you'll have a different stance than compared to someone who's a cruiser and just riding for a long time on a concrete trail. All right, let's hop on the board and let's talk about the different stances. Okay, so the stance that I'm currently on right now am using, this is the one that I kind of got comfortable with. So my back foot pretty much follows the line of the stock grip tape pattern here, which is pretty much diagonal. It kind of cuts through sideways to the board. I like to place my foot somewhere right here. And then as far as the front foot goes, it follows the similar pattern here. And so I like to use kind of like the entire board if I can. And it kind of goes on this type of look here. I just lean into it. And this is how I ride. And I find it very comfortable, very relaxing. Minimal foot fatigue. I still do get foot fatigue, but I find it that I get the least amount of foot fatigue with this stance. And I think the reason for this stance is because of how I walk. If you notice my walking pattern, my feet tend to go outwards like this direction a little bit. And I mean, it's not the best walking pattern in the world. I'm sure it's not really healthy, but it's just my habit. And so I guess that's just with the way my foot rests. And so I just tried it out and it was pretty comfortable. Now, when I was first starting off, I had a super wide stance. I think we can put in a clip of me first trying the Onewheel. Yeah, pretty much I was on a super wide stance. Actually, riding like this now, I feel super uncomfortable. It's a very, I don't know, it doesn't feel great. Natural, I guess. Oh man, turning is super difficult. With such wide stance like that, I do feel a little bit uneasy. It definitely is harder to turn. So if you get a super wide stance, it's gonna be very difficult to turn. And let's talk about the back foot, because I think the back foot is pretty important as far as placement goes on riding style. So I find it with the back foot, if you can get that back foot as close as possible to the fender. Sorry, my fender's kind of jacked up. I need to get another one. This board's been through a lot since I got it. But yeah, as close as you can get the back foot, the rear foot to the fender, it'll help you steer much better. See how I can navigate that carve a lot better now? See how tight that turn is. I also find that the rear foot, it plays a big role on ride stability. So for example, if I'm going in high speed and I start lifting the back foot, then I'm gonna start wobbling. Like the board's gonna wobble, it's not very fun. So yeah, I find that having a good rear foot stability is important for ride stability. And if you're experiencing wobbles, like I mentioned in my first video about how to ride one wheels, if you're a beginner and you're experiencing a lot of wobbling going on, lower your tire pressure first, and then if you're still getting wobbling, you might have some issues with your ride stance regarding your back foot. So try to get a stable rear foot position. Whatever position that leads you to lift your heel, you want to avoid that. Your front foot and your rear foot does play both roles in steering, but I feel like for carving and whatnot, and for steering in general, your rear foot does a lot of the work. Okay, so let's talk about maybe having the front foot forward or as close as possible to the wheel or the fender. Okay, this feels incredibly odd because I usually don't ride like this. And I can already tell my front leg here is lifted up far more when I'm doing this. I wouldn't really recommend this, and actually, it's not too difficult to turn. Yeah, so the turning radius doesn't suffer from this, but I feel like this may also cause issues with the sensor. Be a possibility that sensors might have improper contact.
Imperfect contact.
Override with your foot if you do ride like that. The main thing that I'm noticing, if you put your foot really close to the front, my knee starts to raise up a little bit more. So when you start riding, I'm pretty sure that's going to cause some strain to your foot and your knees. Especially when you hit pushback, that pushback is going to feel a lot more stronger. Okay, so we got the rear position normally now, and the front position being all the way out. So now my knees actually feel more tucked in, and my left knee is more bent, and my right knee is pretty much straight. And these rows are sketchy. Turning is slightly more difficult though. Yeah, turning wise in this position does make it slightly more difficult. I feel like definitely once your foot is closer to the wheel or the fender, it's gonna help you turn better. But so far, I'm feeling less of the lean and the pushback on the Onewheel. So maybe this might be good for long range commutes. I think it might be worth trying out. I'm gonna have to try this out. Definitely feels a little bit less stable. So I don't know if I'm gonna keep doing that. I definitely feel more comfortable in the position that I had originally. And it is a lot more difficult to turn in this current position. All right, so you might be thinking now, well, if that's the case, then wouldn't it be like the maximum carve mode if I had both my rear foot and my front foot on closer to the fender as possible? Well, let's try it out, see how that feels like. Improper contact.
Imperfect contact.
So your foot has to be really flat onto the sensor or else the sensor's not going to register. So that's what I was referring to earlier, saying that the sensor might not register correctly if you do this on the front foot. This doesn't feel comfortable, guys. I mean, okay, turn radius wise, definitely turning is, yeah, this would be like maximum carve mode. Oh my gosh, look at the turn radius on this thing. Yep, I would say this would be the maximum carve mode. This is pretty interesting. This is a pretty interesting experiment we got going on here. So yeah, when my foot is pretty much all the way close to the fender, to the wheel, turning is very, very, very easy. But also at the same time, I'm very uncomfortable riding the Onewheel. So I don't know, maybe it might be good for some tricks and stuff, but also if you don't have a fender, I wouldn't recommend this because the tire's gonna burn on your leg. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and place my rear foot all the way out to the back, and then front foot as normal, as usual, on my normal riding stance. Yeah, so definitely, as expected, my rear foot is all the way in the back and I lose a bit of carvability, so it's harder to turn. And the way I'm measuring my turn radius is actually, I'm turning around the car right now. And I notice with this position, I'm taking a wider turn compared to when I was on max carve mode with both of my feet touching the fender. But for ride comfort wise, personally, this isn't very comfortable to me, but it doesn't really affect my knees one way or another. I'm not Captain Morganing on one side or the other really. So if this is the position that you're comfortable with, maybe this might be the correct stance for you. All right, so I guess the takeaway for this video is how your ride stance affects your ability to ride, how the characteristics of the Onewheel changes a little bit. So definitely when your foot is closer to the fender or the wheel on each side, on either side, it's going to affect your ability to carve and to turn. It's going to help you turn more closer your foot is to the fender or the wheel. Otherwise, the biggest takeaway and the best way to find the correct stance for you is to kind of analyze your walking pattern and see what kind of pattern you walk on and try to kind of emulate that in your stance. If that doesn't work out for you, because this is just my personal experience, then I would just kind of keep trying and seeing which pattern, shift it a little bit, one variable at a time, gets you the most comfortable ride and matches to your riding style. So I hope this video helped, and guys, if you have any tips or tricks on riding stances and if you experience something different, because I'm all just figuring this out on my own as well, leave it down in the comments below. I'd love to hear them. So yeah, thank you guys for watching. This is Slide Dan. I'll see you guys in the next video, all right?